the Last Counsel. When he was about to breathe his last, he said repeatedly, "Lo! Be careful of prayer and of those whom you possess or have under your charge." He continued to repeat these words until they became inaudible, but it appeared that he was trying to express them. Ali says that he heard the Prophet of Allah commending the Muslims to be careful of prayer and purdu and to be generous to their slaves and subordinates. Aisha relates that while she has started reciting the last two surahs of the Quran over the Prophet, he lifted up his eyes and said, "With the exalted companion. With the exalted companion." Just at that moment, Abdurrahman bin Abu Bakr entered the room with a green toothstick in his hand. The Prophet looked at it in a way that she thought he wanted it. She chewed it a little to make it soft and pliable, and gave it to him. He rubbed his teeth with it as he used to rub before and tried to hand it over to her, but it fell down from his hands. She further says that a cup of water was kept near him. He dipped his hand in it and then wiped his face, saying, "There is no God but Allah. Verily, there are pangs of death." Then he lifted up his forefinger and said, "With the exalted companion," until his soul took departed and his forefinger dropped on one side into the water. Aisha said that when the Prophet was about to leave them behind, he had his head on her thigh. He fainted in a split second and then, regaining consciousness, looked up towards the ceiling, saying all the while, "Verily, with the exalted companion." And with these words on his lips, the Prophet of Allah was yielding his last breath. How the Prophet left this world. When the Prophet abandoned this world, he had all of Arabia well in his hand. The sovereign and rulers were scared by his rising power, while his companions were ever willing to undergo any sacrifice, to lay down their own lives and to surrender up their wealth, property and children for his sake. Yet he left this world without a single dinar or dirham or a slave or a bondmaid in his possession. All that he owned at the time was one white mule, some weapons, and a piece of land, which had already been given away in charity. The Prophet's coat of mail had been pawned to a Jew for 30 saws of barley when he died, and nothing was left with him to retrieve it. The Prophet secured the freedom of 40 slaves during his illness. Only 6 or 7 dinars were left with Aisha, but he asked her to give away even those in charity. Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, relates that on the day the Prophet of Allah died, there was nothing in her house which could be taken by a living being except for a little barley left in a cupboard. It lasted for a few days until she weighed it, and that very day it was all used. The Prophet died on Monday, the 12th day of Rabi'a al-Awwal, in the heat of noon after the sun had passed the meridian. He was then 63 years of age. As related by most of the traditionists, this was the darkest hour for the Muslims, a day gloomy and lament for humanity, just as his birth had signaled hope and cheerfulness for the whole world. Anas and Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said that when the Messenger of Allah came to Medina, everything looked better and brighter, but no day was worse or darker than the day he died. Some of the people saw him, in weeping when the Prophet was bedridden. When they asked what had made her weep, she replied, "Of course, I know that the Prophet of Allah will quite leave this world, but I am weeping because the revelation from heaven has come to an end." Bewilderment of the companions. The news of the Prophet's death fell like a thunderbolt on his companions. All were stunned because of the ardent love and esteem they had for him. Such was their reliance on his loving care as the children are assured of the protection of their parents. Their distress was not at all surprising, for Allah speaks of the Prophet's concern for his followers. "There hath come unto you a messenger, one of yourselves, unto whom aught that ye are overburdened is grievous, full of concern for you, for the believers full of pity, merciful." The Prophet was so gracious and considerate that his every companion believed himself to be the closest to him and never had any misgivings about his love and confidence. It was the reliance born of absolute trust mingled with devotion that had made it difficult for some of them to think of the day when the Prophet would depart from this world, leaving them alone. One of these was Umar, who had been one of the closest to the Prophet. And when he was told that the Messenger of Allah was already dead, he protested violently. He went so far as to address the people in the Prophet's mosque and told them that Allah's Prophet would not quit this world until Allah had destroyed the hypocrites. The courageous proclamation by Abu Bakr, a man of determination and courage, was needed at this difficult hour. And this man was Abu Bakr, the most senior of the Prophet's companions, who had been selected by Allah to take over the legacy of the Prophet with a firm hand. When the news reached him, he hurried back from his house. For a moment he stopped at the door of the mosque where Umar was resolutely speaking to the people. Without paying heed to anybody, he proceeded to Aisha's room where the dead body of the Prophet lay covered with a mantle. He uncovered the Prophet's face and kissed it. Then he proceeded to say, "My father and mother be your ransom. You have tasted the death Allah had decreed for you, a second death will never overtake you." Replacing the mantle on the Prophet's face, he then went out to the mosque. Umar was still making a harangue to the people, so he said gently, "Umar, keep quiet." But Umar was too excited to listen to Abu Bakr. Now, Abu Bakr realized that Umar was not in a mood to terminate his speech. So he stepped forward and called out to the people, whereupon they came round to him leaving Umar. Abu Bakr praised Allah and then said, O men, if any one of you worshipped Muhammad, let him know that Muhammad is dead. But if anyone worships Allah, then Allah is alive and he will never die. Then he recited the Quranic verse. Muhammad is but a messenger, messengers, the like of whom, have passed away before him. Will it be that, when he dieth or is slain, will turn back on your heels? He who turneth back doth no hurt to Allah, and Allah will reward the thankful. All those persons who were present on the occasion later on stated on oath that when Abu Bakr recited the verse, it seemed as if it had just been revealed. Umar said, when I heard Abu Bakr reciting that verse, I was taken aback and fell down as if I did not have a leg to stand on. I felt as if I had then come to know of the Prophet's death.